My guy, Stephen. So great to have you back on. For those that have not listened to our previous podcasts, would you just give us like a quick 1 to 2 minute bio or like recap a little bit about you?
Yeah, absolutely. First and foremost, Mike, thanks for having me on. I think this might be number three,
I think
if
so.
not three, four, but
Yeah.
definitely not Joe Ken status yet. But
We can all strive to get there, right?
yeah, right, getting close. So my name is Stephen Calarco. I am a personal trainer, strength coach. I've been coaching for this is year 17, and I own and operate the Strength Spot out of Hartford, Connecticut.
I love it. I love it. So, a little insight. I know I talked about this early on. I'll link to like my 2024 review, 2025 preview episode. But one of the things that I wanted to do was bring people on, such as yourself, people that I'm tight with, that I have just great conversations with, and kind of give the listeners like an inside view into what an industry vet does, right? So, when I think of an industry vet, I think of you, I think of Andy, I think of Luca, Joel, people that have done this for a long time, maybe not like Mike Boyle status or Joe
Right.
Ken status, although I'll try and get Joe on. But man, I just want some insights into like how you approach this, because I think young trainers, young coaches, they need to figure out like, what does it mean to be a pro? Like, how do you really like enamor yourself and fall in love with this industry? And maybe not just the first time, because the first time's easy, right?
Right, right,
But like, how do you stay in love with the industry and make this a real career? So let's start super broad. I've got a couple topics that I'd love to just chat about with you, but let's start with this idea of starting, owning, operating a business. So I would love to hear like what made you think like I don't want to just be a trainer. I want to own my own business. What was that thought process like?
I mean, I think that thought process just evolved over the years, right? Like,
Yeah.
uh, I'm stubborn. I can be hard headed, right? I'm
Yep.
Italian. It just goes, it just is what it is. But I think over the years, as my thought process has evolved, as I evolved as a coach, like as I was in these facilities and working for these bosses, like I kept butting heads, whether it
Mm,
was like I thought there was a better way to do this, or I thought there were improvements that could be made, or I was like, no, I don't really believe in this, whether it's fat loss challenge that we're running or this initiative or something like that for valid reasons. But this is the way they've always done things. And I just felt like I was every facility I was at, it was a square peg into a round hole. And at some point, and I know, like, I had a boss, Scott Martin, who I used to work for at a commercial gym called Big Sky. But he was like, we were talking, and he was like, listen, like, I really think that you should be your own boss eventually. Because I was asking
mm,
him, because I kept like butting heads with my coworkers, and this was a time that like I was engulfed in learning a ton. Like
yeah.
I didn't start college till I was 25. So when I started, and I actually started at a community college and getting like a degree in general studies. So I really didn't decide that it was going to be exercise science until I was 27, where I went to Springfield College. So in my mind, I had already felt like I was behind my peers significantly. Those
Yeah.
who
Yeah.
graduated high school at 18, went the 4 year degree route, got a job in finance, and did X, Y, and Z. So by the time I got to Springfield, I know I'm going off on a tangent, but I felt
No,
like
I love it.
I felt like I had to cram as much knowledge and play catch up as much as possible,
Sure.
which led me down to different continuing education seminars and different people. And at that time, I kept butting heads with my coworkers because they had always operated inside this box. And I was learning material that was forcing me to critically think about what I was doing and thinking that there was a better way. So I kept butting heads with my coworkers. And like when I eventually left the company, Scott and I kind of had like an exit interview, and he was like, listen, like, I think you really should be your own boss. Like,
Mm,
I think that that's who you are as a person. And you're less of like, go with the flow, follow the pack type of deal. You just have to do things your own way. And that's always been in the back of my mind. And after multiple experiences at other places, he was right. So you just kind of take the leap on your own. And it's like, it's a scary freaking thing, man. Like
yeah.
if you've done it, no matter what time you're doing it, but it is a scary thing. And I actually remember having a conversation, speaking of Andy McCloy, like I called Andy probably in 2019 and was like, hey man, do you have a time to talk? Because I like, there are very few people in the industry, as you could like attest to, who are who they portray themselves to be. Do you know what I
Absolutely.
mean?
A thousand
And,
percent. Yes.
right. So, and I consider you one of those guys. I consider Andy one of those guys. I consider Luca one of those guys. I
Yeah.
can, you know what I mean? So,
Yeah.
so I called him and I was like, because I had a business partner at the time. and I was like, hey man, this is not working out. Like me and this guy are parting ways. Like, what is going on? And he was like, listen, I think that you're very, paraphrasing what he said because the language was a little bit more colorful, but but he was like, I think that you're so risk adverse, like you didn't feel comfortable going all in on your own. It just felt easier for you to like dip your toe in the water with somebody else. Do you know what I
Yeah.
mean? Who
Yeah.
was sharing in part of the rent or this and that. And I just think that all of those experience amongst others kind of led me to kind of doing my own thing.
Yeah. No, I love it, man. No, I always tell people, look, first of all, if you're considering this, just realize there is no perfect time. Like literally, there's no perfect time. And I always like there's a couple things in life, there's never a perfect time, right? Like getting married,
Yep.
having a kid,
Yep.
owning a business, starting a business. These are all things like you could kick that can down the curb and keep going and never feel like, oh, there's always a time where you feel like, oh, things will be a little bit better.
Right, right, right.
You got to take the plunge, man. And you're got to be okay with like the unknowing and the discomfort, the awkwardness. It's all going to come, but you'll get through
Yeah, like you'll never have enough money to have a kid, right? Like
it. Yeah.
you'll never have enough money to start a business. I mean, you can, but like things just always pile up no matter what. It's kind of like a contractor, right? Like my wife and I are getting a bunch of work done in our house now. Whatever the first estimate is, like multiply that by three or at least two.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
because things are always going to come up, right? Things, oh well, this job was like this, but then we pulled up your floor and there was all this plumbing issue or this and that. Like it's like things always happen, so you'll never be fully ready. You just got to take the leap.
Yeah. Yeah. So when you go and you start this business, right?
Right.
What are some things that you envisioned being problems? And then what were some things that maybe you didn't have on your radar that you're like, oh, didn't expect that?
Like, what did I know was going to be a problem? I think that just, um, I think in my old space, I knew I had a feeling after like the first 3 months of what it was like in that space that my landlord was going to be a problem. And
Yes, I remember
navigating
you
that,
telling me that. Yeah.
yeah, right. So navigating that entire relationship for 3 years was a huge pain in the ass. Like a absolute pain in the ass. And true definition of what like a slumlord is. But I was such under the gun. I was training people out of a garage. And if you've ever trained like a group of people out of a garage in like the summer heat, having somebody ride an eco bike, like it's not
Oh
a good
yeah.
time.
It's
So,
miserable.
right. So I was under the gun and had to make a decision on a lease. And knowing what I know now, and for my current space, like I did my due diligence, like I found out other properties that this guy managed and or this company managed, and I looked at them and I talked to the business owners. But when I signed my last lease, which was 3 years, I signed it in we opened in 21, right? So
Yep.
like this whole so for that whole 3 years, like it was a huge issue, and I never talked to any of the other tenants in the building because I just needed to make a decision, and it was cheap rent, and I was like, okay, this is great. And then after a while, like the maintenance of the building, the maintenance of the bathrooms, maintenance of the parking lot, all this stuff like came about, and it just became like a huge pain in the ass.
Yeah.
So that's one thing. Like scheduling and billing has really like within the first 3 years. I know you talked about this on your last podcast, but like when you
Yep.
first start out, man, you are taking any form of payment that people will pay you with. They'll pay
Yep.
you in pennies, they'll pay you cash, they'll pay you Venmo, they'll pay you by check or credit card. Like you take it all. And then, you know, that becomes an issue because people are paying at different times and you're trying to get people on recurring billing, which is something that I know that Alan Cosgrove, you mentioned, talked to you about early on
Yeah.
in your business. But having predictable income and you can make business decisions based upon that. And then like the scheduling kind of became a pain where people were texting your personal number, changing schedules at all times of the day and stuff like
Yep.
that. And I try to be open to my clients, but it's not, and I make it very clear to my clients, like, listen, you will have access to me, but like when I'm home, like I'm home with my wife and I'm home with my kids.
Right.
So, and it's hard to compartmentalize that, man. Like, if I can't sleep, like, I'm wondering, like, if I lose like 5 clients this week, can I afford rent? Like all this other type of
Yeah.
stuff. Those are the things
Yeah.
that keep you up at night. So, being able to do, having some scheduling changes to my personal line was a huge pain that I'm trying to get away from now. But
Yeah.
when you open your business starting, like you don't have the couple $100s a month it is to use a MindBody or a Zen planner or some sort of scheduling service or payment method, right? Like that's just extra money that you need for like other stuff and
Right.
supplies and other stuff. So, those are three main issues off the top of my head that I could think of. Like, what
Yeah.
about yourself?
I mean, so like I was making some notes, but like I think the first thing, and I've talked about this a lot, but I don't think you ever truly understand or appreciate it until you go out on your own, is that when you become your own boss, like when you open your own facility, like training is literally like only half of your job now. Like it used to be your whole job. Now
Yep.
it's like a half or like a quarter of your job because now you're in charge of marketing, you're in charge
Right.
of selling, you're in charge of ops, like all the stuff that you just talked about, right? And when you're working for somebody else, hey, if somebody doesn't pay, it's somebody else's job to
Right.
go collect, right? Oh, somebody late cancels. Well, somebody else deals with that conversation
Right.
and you
Exactly.
get paid, versus now you have all these conversations, right? So I always talk about like, you got to be prepared to wear all these different hats, or you got to have people in your network. Maybe you can barter with somebody that'll do some marketing, right? Like you try and find some ways to fill in these gaps, but just understand and appreciate the fact that, and this is why I always say, you better be a good trainer first,
Yep.
because as soon as you take on all these other jobs, your ability to go in and do your continuing education and level up as a trainer or coach kind of goes away. Like you get the reps, but you can't do the back end stuff that maybe you're used to doing when you're
Right.
younger.
And I think that to piggyback off of that, you mentioned bartering, and I had like, it's interesting. I've done this a couple of times over my training career, but I've found out now that sometimes it doesn't always work, that the level of service I'm providing coaching is not necessarily the level of service I'm getting back for who I'm bartering with, whether it's managing my
Yes.
social media or not. So at some point, I've come to the determination now, like, just let me pay you for what your service is and what you charge, and then I'll do the same. Like, it's bitten me in
Yes.
the ass more times than not. And like some other stuff, like you mentioned marketing, it's so interesting when you're young, or excuse me, when you're just starting out, people will try to tell you, oh, you got to spend X amount of dollars on marketing. But like, if you watch social media, the algorithm changes so much all the
Yeah.
time. Like, it's hard to keep up with that and coach and do all this other type of stuff. So yeah, man,
It, it, it's just a lot. It's a lot. And I love that advice. That's actually something Alan told me as well. He's like, hey, if it's worth bartering, just make it to where it's a cash agreement, right? Like, hey, I pay you for your service, you pay me for mine. It ends up being the same,
right.
but ultimately there's a little bit more accountability there because yeah, I've seen that happen too. Luckily, that hasn't happened to me.
Nice.
I've only bartered with one or two other people, and I know them. Like
Right.
I know them on a personal level, so it's less of an issue. But yeah, dude, it's really, really hard if you don't have some of those parameters in place.
Right, especially, and it's like, people will tell you to, make sure you have all these systems, make sure you have all these systems, but in the back of your mind, that's just one more thing added to a never-ending to-do list where you feel like you're scrambling all the time,
Yes,
right? So that's why
yes,
most people or some business coaches will say like the first person you should hire should be an admin to help with all that back end stuff.
yes. It makes a huge difference. It makes a huge
1000%.
difference, especially too. Like I don't know about you, like I don't mind peopling, and I can put on my people hat, the extrovert hat when I need to,
Right.
but like always being extroverted and having to go out and have all these other conversations on top of training, man, sometimes that's a lot.
Oh, for
Sometimes
sure.
you need somebody to be like the face and do the smiling and greet everybody and warm them
Right.
up so that when they come to you, they're already kind of like ready to go.
Well, when I tell people, even my wife, for the first little bit that we met one another, even my clients, I tell people like I'm naturally an introvert, and they're like, "No way, I don't believe you." I was like, "Listen, it takes every ounce of energy for me to be like this, and I can turn it on and I can
Yes.
maintain it for a little bit, but it is literally draining. Like the Street Fighter
Yes.
games from when we were kids, like my superpower is just going all the way
Right.
down." And so like when I drive home, like I'll drive home in silence. Like I won't listen to podcasts. Like I
Yeah.
am so drained. I've listened to the same, 150, 200 songs at the gym. Like I'm talking to people all day about stuff and I enjoy talking to these people, but it is literally draining.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So, one other question on this topic, because I think this is interesting. You obviously worked other places,
Yep.
right? Like you experienced other places. You went to school. I know you've been big on Con Ed, which we'll talk about here in a little bit. So, you've been
Right.
to other gyms. How did you kind of create your vision for your gym? Because when I think of your gym, right? Because you brought me in, let me do a little seminar there. Like I think high level coaching,
Yep.
right? Like you're great with your clients, super freaking clean, right? I know
Yep.
you take great
Yep.
pride in the
Yep. Yep.
cleanliness of your
For
gym.
sure.
So talk to me, like, how did you come about with your vision of like, hey, these are the things that I've seen. This is what I want my gym to be like.
Yeah, and that's the big thing, right? It's things that I've seen over my career, right? And what I thought my gym was going to be like when I first started coaching at, 27 was not my vision for what it was now. Like at
Yeah.
27, I was a competitive Olympic lifter. I was like, "Oh my gosh, this gym is going to be great. Like I'm going to have 12 platforms and all these squat racks and this
Yes.
and that." And now it is the complete opposite. So I just think it's evolved. Like I listen, like we train, I have some adults, right? Or excuse me, I have some athletes, but I have 90% adults, and we are a gym where adults get after it and train hard. And I have people that are in their 60s and 70s pulling north of 2 slabs of beef on each side deadlifting.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's just what it is. And I've always wanted to create a space where it's no nonsense. Like we have a very family atmosphere. Like I always joke, like it's the sixth love language that they don't talk about is talking shit, and that's our love language at our gym. Like we talk a bunch of junk to one another. We have a good time, but like people train hard, and I think that it starts with me. You know what I mean? Like
Yes.
I think it's important. And we can have this discussion. Like, are you somebody who believes like people should look the part
I
and be
mean,
the part?
yes. Yeah. I don't think you have to be like Arnold,
Yep.
right? Or
Yep.
like, I mean, I train like high level basketball player. I'm never going to look like, I can't make myself 6'5",
Right, right,
but
right.
you should look like you train and you take care of yourself.
Right. And that's the thing, right? And I think your coaching resonates with people when they know that you do the same.
Yeah,
Right? Like
absolutely.
you're not gonna take dental advice, or you're not gonna go see a dentist with wooden teeth is the
Yeah.
traditional metaphor, right? It's
Yeah.
the same thing.
Yeah.
Like I don't need to be bodybuilding show ready 12 months out of the year, but I should look like I train. And I think it's important that I post some of my own training that people know I still put in effort, because we're big on effort here.
Yeah.
And um, yeah, I think that, yeah, and I just think that my experience of 17 years coaching, like knowing what I wanted my facility design, the design and layout of my facility to look at. Like if you go to Boyle's, it is very much a factory, but they have it down to a science, like where
Yeah.
people warm up, where people do their, their sprints and their med ball throws and their jumps and their plyos and stuff, to where they do the strength training, to the back room where they do the conditioning, and it flows very well. And then
Yeah.
you get your stuff and you get out.
Yes.
So I think that those experiences and what I wanted, like I wanted the gym to be true to myself.
Yeah.
And I have a very laid back personality, but like this is what I do. Like this is what I went to undergrad school for, or excuse me, undergrad for, and this is what I went to grad school for. The gym is based on like high level coaching, but I want people to enjoy my time being here. Like I
Yes.
managed a Starbucks for 6 years, and back then, like Howard Schultz always wanted them to be the third place.
Yeah.
So when I built this gym, I was like, listen, like when people are done, I want them to be able to sit in the lobby and answer some emails and feel comfortable hanging out here. Like if people, had to bring their kid and they were hanging out in the lobby, like the TV's there for them to watch something. So like I always wanted that to be the case. And then, when we moved here, side story, a bunch of my clients were helping me move, and we got the lobby all set up, we got a bunch of equipment in the gym, and then we are all kind of hanging out, having a beer at the lobby and just shooting the shit. And I was like, this is what I wanted. Like
Right. Yes.
this is the type
Yeah.
of community I wanted. And it takes a while. Like you don't just, if you talk to people who have spent years trying to build a community, like you don't just snap your fingers and let it happen. Like it starts with you, and it's got to be this like slow drip, like the slow type of build.
Yes.
So, and I think the best thing you could do is lead by example and
Yes.
not just talk about it. Like you have to be about it.
Yeah, I agree 1,000%. A couple things came up, like just things that I thought about when you were discussing that. Number one, I did this podcast with Vince Gabriel a while back where we talked about business, and he had that same thought, right? Like he thought, oh, I'm just going to have all young athletes in my gym. And it's not to say you can't have a gym that has young athletes in it, but
For
it's
sure.
harder. And that's
Yep.
another topic of discussion. But like when we opened iFast, right? I just think about, we cater to anybody, right? You could come in and open gym up to 3 times a week training. And really quickly, you start to figure out, hey, the people that are paying for the most coaching are the people I need to train, right?
Right.
Because those are the people that actually help me grow my business. So
Right.
like when iFast open and we've got this, man, it was so much fun. We had just this eclectic group of people. We had like figure competitors and bobsledders and MMA fighters. most of them were paying like almost nothing. you
Right.
know? So then you look at like peak iFast. Hey man, we knew everybody there was training 2 or 3 times a week with us, right?
Right.
So we knew, hey man, we know how much money we're bringing in every month. I know I can pay all my coaches, rent's taken care of. We're putting money aside for that rainy day fund, aka COVID. You know,
Right.
like you just have this ability to run a really sound and stable business. And so yeah, if you don't think your business is going to evolve or change, especially if you're opening your gym when you're younger, just be open to that because chances are things are going to change.
Right. Like that's the thing, right? A lot of these young coaches want to train flashy athletes and all this stuff when you don't realize like the downside of dealing with mostly athletes is dealing with their parents. And
Yeah.
you know what I mean?
Yeah.
That is a huge component. And then
Yep.
plus a lot of these athletes, especially if you're dealing with like really good athletes, think they're entitled. And they don't really pay a lot. They always want these deals and discounts, and then they want to shoot content in your gym. And then they're seasonal. Like just
The
think of it from a
seasonality
money,
is the
yeah,
worst.
right. Like the
Yeah.
money perspective, right? So, Gen Pop pays the bills, and if you find a group of adults or Gen Pop people that train hard and you get along with, like it is a good time. And don't get me
Yeah.
wrong, like everybody has their hard days and hard clients, but like that is a great culture if you have people that want to be there instead of like, and I think you talked about, what was it, last podcast or the podcast before, where like you have empathy, but like it only goes so far. Like if I have
Absolutely.
to drag you throughout your entire workout, especially in a small group personal training setting, like that's tough because now I'm giving you 80% of the attention, and I can't coach the other three people in your group to a high level.
Yeah. Yeah. No, you're absolutely right. Like I just think of it like this. There is a limited amount of empathy, right? Because we
For
all have
sure.
bad days, dude.
Of
I have
course.
days I walk in the gym and whatever, I didn't sleep or things come up in life. I
For
get
sure.
it. But
Yep.
if I'm dragging you through your workout every day, right? Like that's not what I signed up for. And
Right.
so I always tell people, look, that's not a bad thing. Hey, there are trainers and coaches that are more than willing to do that because that's their personality type. They
Right.
enjoy that part of it.
Right.
For me, that's not the part that brings me joy.
Right.
So I think
Or
it's figuring out, hey, who are my people and who are not. And when you can create a group of your people in your gym, now you've got something that can really be special.
Yeah, and that's not something that you have the luxury of doing when you first start out. When you're
No.
when you're young, when you first start out, anybody breathing and has a bank account, like we're training. But
Yeah.
other than
Let's
that,
rock.
yeah, right. But like, and then that's hard, right? So, but the other thing about it is if you have that person where I'm dragging you through a workout, but in it's a small group personal training setting, like, hey, this setting is not a great fit for you. Like we have to be one on one. But then they don't want to pay for that price point. It's like, okay, then we have to have discussion that maybe I'm just not the best fit for what you need or that you can afford right now. And if that's the case, like let me see if I could help you, point you in a direction where, maybe somebody is at a different price point, but is not going to like hurt you either.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, let's shift gears a little bit because something else I know we're both passionate about is continuing education in
Right.
this industry. I would love to hear. First off, I know you've talked about this before, but maybe recap like why did you wait a little while to go to school,
Yep.
right? And then you talked about on the back end of that you felt compelled to catch up. So maybe talk about why did you wait a little while to start, and then what were some things that you did to try and catch up.
So yeah, so I didn't start undergrad until I was 25. Like I tried community college out of school. Like I was Yeah, so I tried community college a couple times out of high school. It just wasn't for me. Like I wasn't
Yeah,
ready. But I worked, right. So I was
yeah,
going to go to culinary school. So my mom and I had visited the Culinary Institute of America. Like it was after I went through a pretty significant weight loss transformation in high school. That's
yep,
in previous podcasts that you can connect in the notes. But
yep,
so after that, I taught myself how to cook. Like I fell in love with cooking. So at that time, when I realized school wasn't for me, I worked my way up in Starbucks. I was a manager. I managed the store. I was a sous chef at an oyster bar. I was working, just college was
right.
not for me.
Yeah,
And
sure.
then when I moved up to the Hartford area, I was still managing the Starbucks, but I was going to this 24-hour gym, because I'd get off of work and I'd be hyped up on espresso, and it was time to get a pump session in. So
Yeah,
I talked to the training manager there, and that's kind of how that relationship, or I got my foot in the door
mm,
for training. But then I met one of my mentors, his name's Jason Kaliva, who was doing his thesis at Springfield College. And I quickly realized, like, when you're training in a commercial gym and you're getting paid peanuts, you quickly realize there's a ceiling in this industry for, without having a degree. And I'm not saying you have to have a degree to be a great coach, but in my mind, I was like, I've become very passionate about this. What's the next step? What is my mentor doing? He's at
Yeah.
Springfield College. Like, that's what I'm gonna do. And that was
Sure.
literally the only school I applied to. And got in. And yeah, so I had gotten my associates, my 2-year degree, and then I wanted to further my knowledge. So I went to Springfield, and just my personality, I thrive in a small school setting. Like if I
Yeah.
went to like an Arizona State or a Miami, like there's no way I would learn. I never go to class. so
Right.
so when I went up there, I was taking part in his thesis, and I met with his advisor, and he was like, well, so if you come to school for 2 years, like this is what your schedule would look like. And I was all in from that point.
Yeah.
When I started there, Pat Davison was one of my professors.
It's a good one.
So
It's a good one
yeah,
to have.
so
Yeah.
great person to learn from. But so then I started going to continuing education places that Pat was going to because he was a mentor. He was somebody I looked up to, which put me in great rooms to meet with people, but I had no business going to some of these seminars. Do you know what I mean? Like,
Sure.
who are you? Who do you work with, and who do you serve? So I remember, like, I went to the Omega Wave seminar that
Oh
Bill went
yeah.
to and Eric Otter, and
Yeah.
I'm like, bro, I train like 50-year-old adults. Like, what am I doing here? Do you know what I mean? Like, I'm not buying
Sure.
one of these. I'm not buying one of these units. But like, when you're trying to go all in, you want to do what your professors, you want to do with what your mentors are doing, right? And
Yep.
who they're learning from. And I think that made me a lot of connections. But it also wasn't really a good use of my time early on.
Okay.
I think
Interesting.
that I mean, like, who was I using that for? I think that some of the principles and the people, and that's the great thing about in-person seminars, right? The connections and the discussions on the side that you
Yes.
make, right?
See, yeah, okay. See, that's more the lens that I was looking at this through. So, when I think back, I don't remember where we met exactly. I don't know if it was at a Perform Better or what, but Perform Better immediately comes to mind,
Right.
right? And I know they're still out there, they're still doing their thing, but I spoke at Perform Better for 3 years. I attended before and after that for a while. But I think of Perform Better, it's like going I'm from Muncie, Indiana, right? So it's not
Right.
like the food is super diverse.
Right.
So, when somebody's like, we're going to Indian, right? Well, I don't even know what kind of Indian food I like.
Right.
So
Right. Right.
you go to the buffet so you can
Yep.
try everything,
Yep.
right?
Yep.
That's what Perform Better is, right? Like you can go and you can watch Martin Rooney, and then next door it's Alan Cosgrove and he's talking about business, and then later it's Stuart McGill talking about backs. So
Right.
I think those events are great because you get a little taste of everything.
Right.
You kind of figure out, oh, these are the people I resonate with, and then you're absolutely right. I think the biggest part of going to any event, and again, I'm going to beat this drum because I just had an event this last weekend.
Right.
Going to events gets you in better rooms, right? Whether it's speakers, whether it's other motivated trainers and coaches. If you want to keep the fire lit, it's really hard to do that if you're off on an island doing things by yourself 365 days out of the year.
For sure. And I think that like that was worth the price of admission, regardless of the content I was learning. Like
Yeah.
when I first got to Springfield, right? I went through everything. We had a great relationship with John Tureen, right? The guy who
Oh yeah.
the
He
strength
was
coach for the
he was
Colts,
with the
right?
Colts. Yeah.
Yeah, so big FMS guy. So they brought him in. Went down the FMS rabbit hole, and then I did the FRC certifications, right? And then we started to go down the PRI rabbit hole, and I took
Yep.
like 5 courses from them, and then that led me into the room with Val and doing Omega Wave, and then Cal Dees came and did a seminar there, and then I'm learning from Charlie Weingroff and all these places, and I was just collecting like acronyms after my last name in the email.
Right.
And it was like, all right, man, like, who do you work with? Who do you serve? Like, is this really serving you? Yeah,
Yeah.
right. Like, you're becoming educated and you're forming all these relationships, and that's great. But like, where does it stop? What is your niche going to be? And what are we doing with all this? Right. So
Yep.
it's like, I think that, and then there was a point, and I don't know when that was, that I had to take a step back from doing this sort of stuff because I was like, all right, if I'm going to formulate my gym, my studio, my brand, what I'm trying to do, like, I have a joke with one of my clients, Gina in the gym. If you try to be all things to all people, you're going to be nothing to nobody. right?
Yes.
So it's
That's great
like
advice.
I don't want to do that.
Right.
So who do I mainly work with? Who do I serve? And what continuing education seminars are going to make me a better coach in this niche? I'm not saying that other things are not great to learn, and I think that's great. Like I've gone to seminars that have nothing to do with what I currently do, but I think it's great for me to speak the same language with physical therapists and surgeons when I have to have conversations with these people, or have conversations with registered dietitians that we could speak the same language. I'm not
Yep.
saying that I'm gonna pretend to be a physical therapist or an RD or whoever, but I want them to know that like I can speak the same language and I have our shared clients' best interests at heart.
Yep. I think that's just great advice. Like when you're starting off, just like anything else, right? Like whether it's high school, college, you start with a whole bunch of random stuff,
Mm-hmm.
right? They try and broaden your base, make you well rounded. Same thing when you're like niching into fitness,
Right.
right? Go to a whole bunch of different things,
For sure.
right? And learn about physical therapy or nutrition, massage, whatever. Do some of these things that may not be directly related to you because
Yep.
it'll make you have better conversations. It'll help give you a deeper appreciation for maybe these other areas. But then, yeah, the longer you do it, I think the more niche down you need to be with your continuing education, right? You just specialize. It's like
Right. For
anything
sure.
else.
And what I meant to say was all that on top of having like a baseline competency in training, like be a great coach first,
Yes.
right? Like
Yes.
understand training first before you do all of these like movement based courses and any of this type of stuff, right? Like
Yep.
understand the training first. But you know what I mean? Like if you're working with, I mean, let's be real, right? Like working with Gen Pop clients is literally GPP forever.
Yeah. Literally. Yeah.
Forever,
Yeah.
right? And then obviously that, changes based on people's goals and stuff like that. But like, do you really need to read super training and some of these old Russian manuals to train these
Yeah.
people? No, but like you and I are both hip hop heads, right? Like you should know where these things come from, right? You
Yes.
don't you
Yes.
don't get you don't get to these new artists without having a Big Daddy Kane and Rakim
All
and
the
all these and
OGs. Yeah.
right, exactly. So I think it's good to understand the history and where some of these concepts come from, but like I don't know, man. Like my 50-year-old client who's got 50 pounds to lose could literally care less about triple block periodization. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like
Yeah. I know.
that's
That's the
so
exact analogy I was going to use. I love triple block periodization
right.
because,
So it's good to understand these things, and I think it's good to talk shop with coaches and like how do these concepts influence what I currently do, but like they don't as much as we like to think they do.
yeah. Dave Tate, I'll probably butcher it, but I'll paraphrase and it'll be close enough. But Dave Tate used to talk about of all the cool stuff right? Like 90% of the cool stuff that you want to learn about, you get to use about 10% of the time.
1000%.
And it's so right. Like nobody wants to see another reel about how to coach a goblet squat. But you know
Right.
what? A goblet squat is probably one of the variations you're going to use 60, 70, 80% of the time with your clients because it always works.
Right, exactly. And that's the thing, right? Like you brought up a good point, and I'm going to sidebar that for a second, but like I am going to make a video about coaching a goblet squat because these are the people that I'm speaking to and my target audience are going to be the ones with this is probably going to be their squat variation that
Yeah.
they're going to be on their trainable menu, right? So
Yeah.
I literally don't post stuff on social media to get other coaches validation. Like I could literally give two shits what you
Yeah.
think about my content. I'm trying to talk to Mrs. Jones,
Yes.
who's 50 years old, has bad knees, you know what I mean, this and that,
Yeah.
and wants to get in shape so she can play with her kids. And I
Dude.
think that a lot of people will tailor their social media content and environment to reinforce their own beliefs. And we all know that that doesn't lead to any sort of growth. It just
Well, it just becomes an echo chamber, right? And that, hey, if you're using it for self-validation, great. But the best thing about that and like the hidden message that you just kind of relayed to everybody is that know who your audience is. Right? Like know who your audience is. So if you're talking about triple block periodization to get a whole bunch of likes on IG, great, but that's not going to drive your business forward.
No, not at all. And the people who are going to come into your business don't care about that. They want to know how you're going to help them feel better about themselves or perform better on the weekends or get faster on the track or whatever it is.
Yeah, I love it, man. I love it. Okay, one more area here because I think you and I, maybe we're just dinosaurs, but I still see the value and the merit of the in-person workshop. If a young coach, right, let's say some new coach comes into your gym and they're like, Steve, I love your work. I want you to mentor me. How do you sell them on the power and the benefit of actually going to courses again? Because everybody now thinks like, look, and this is from a guy that has online courses, right?
Yep,
Like
for
I
sure.
sell online stuff because there is a time and a place for that. And if we're just disseminating knowledge, but talk to me about the power of being in the room.
I just like what we alluded to before. There are side conversations, questions asked by an audience member or an attendee that lead to other discussions. Because if you ask the question, chances are there were 9 other people in the room that were too chicken shit to ask it
Yeah.
themselves, right?
Yes.
So
Yes.
that is in the discussions and the relationships and the side conversations and the friendships are well worth the price of admission.
Yeah.
I also think I am somebody who, if I am looking at an online course, I am just not as like it's hard for me to be 100% present 100% of the time when I'm going through.
Absolutely. Yes.
And I think that when you are in person and you're demoing things and doing the things, right? Like any moron can be behind a computer, go through the course, cheat on the exam and then pass it, right? But like when you
Yep.
have to demonstrate some baseline level of competency in doing the thing, right?
Yep.
And actually feeling what you're going to be putting clients through Monday morning, like there is immense value in that. Like how many
Yes.
people will that you've seen either in person or online that are putting clients through workouts that damn well they have not done themselves, right?
Yes. Yeah.
And it's just like eh, so, and that's the type of person I am. Like I need to feel it. Like I need to know what it feels like. I need to be in the room. I need to watch somebody do it in person. I need to move around the room. Like I want to check from all these different angles. Like I'm the type of person to ask too many questions and annoy
Right.
the presenter, but like I want to know. And
Yeah.
sometimes I feel like, and that I just don't feel like you get the same experience with online online courses.
Yeah.
I mean, some people try to foster it with having like a Facebook community group and
Yeah.
people that ask questions. It's just not the same.
Yeah. It's not.
And I've done both, and I'm not saying that doesn't work for other people. It just doesn't work best for me.
Yeah. So while you were talking, I came up with this list. 3 reasons, right? Number 1, distractions.
Yeah.
I don't care who you are. I don't care how locked in, unless you like are really diligent. Like you go to a different space, put your phone in do not disturb. It's really hard, right? Because I know the second somebody starts rambling or gets on a tangent, when they're talking, I'm like checking IG, right? Yeah. Or somebody texts me and I'm like, oh, I should respond. And next thing you know, it's been 3 minutes later and I missed what they were talking about. So distractions are a big one. Yep. Number 2, the actual learning environment, right? Like if I go to an event, I'm doing all those things, right? Because I want to be present. Like if I paid money to go listen to somebody, my phone is in do not disturb. I've told people, hey, I'm at this event all day, so don't bother me.
Right. Right.
But then I think arguably the biggest thing is the people. And what's interesting, I keep coming back to this because you came to our events. Like we ran a lot of events over the years. One of the things that's unique, and maybe not universally across fitness, but like if I work for Salesforce, and I don't work for Salesforce, but I imagine if I go to their national conference and listen to their keynote speaker, I probably have no opportunity to talk to that keynote speaker, right?
No,
like they're going to speak and they're gone, right? Yep. Or they're in like a little VIP room with all the other, 100 top salespeople. If you come to a fitness conference, not only can you hang out in most cases with all the other attendees, but a lot of times you can get FaceTime with the actual presenters as well.
Absolutely.
Right? Because it's not a big space. So I don't know. I just always come back to like, if you can go to a live event, it's just such a different learning experience.
And like, you'll notice like some of the conversations, like they're just coaches, man. Like, I mean,
really,
the ones who like represent themselves accurately, right? And you meet them, like they're just coaches, man. Like, and I remember I went to Luca's event, the first Vigor summit that I went to might have been in 2017 or maybe in 2017. And I paid for the VIP dinner. I paid for the marketing workshop. And then Luca, because he's extra in what he does, like the VIP event was like a boat tour around harbor in Seattle.
Yes.
And we're hanging out with all these people, and like I'm talking to Berardi, and you just realize these people that you think of like idols, they're just regular coaches, man. And we put in. It's nice to see in some of those conversations about like I don't think that there are a lot of coaches talking about like managing their own personal lives and trying to be a high level coach at the same time. Like,
Yeah.
and I know you've got two kids, like being married, man, having a kid, like trying to pour into your own cup, like on top of being like a high level coach is not for the faint of heart, man. Like it comes
Yeah.
with its challenges for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. It's just funny too. Like, I mean, you may not be on this show if you hadn't attended courses and come
No,
up
not at all.
and talked to me and interacted with me. And it's like, then we find out, oh man, we both got like this mutual love. We both like to cook,
Right.
So
Yep.
you're sending me
Exactly.
like steak recipes now and, reverse sears. And I'm like, okay, no, I
Yep.
like this guy. So I think that's a huge part of it. Now, I want to bring this to our third point because you make a great point. Like, doing all the things is hard,
Yeah,
right?
for
And we
sure.
sign up for this, right? Like, hey, I decided I'm going to be a high level trainer. Like, that's one of my goals. I'm going to run my own business. I want to be a great husband, father, all that stuff. The hard part is you can check those boxes, but then at the end of the day, you still got the you box.
Yep.
And we talked about this up top because I think there's a lot of merit to saying, hey, I don't just talk about this, like I do it, right?
Right.
Like I'm not going to look like you. I'm not going to jump like you. But hey, I'm going to take care of myself. So talk to me about, especially now, because you're a dad, right? It's
Yep.
one thing to do this when you're on your own, but now you're a dad. And I see you, man. I see you punching the clock 4 a.m. sometimes.
Yep. Yep.
What made you decide, like, hey, no, I'm not going to let myself fall off just because I have these other things going on?
Well, so first of all, right, there's a bunch of facets to this, right? Like, first of all, having kids is expensive. Like,
Yeah.
it is
Yes.
very expensive,
That is
right?
so true. Yes.
So on the business side, man, and I don't talk about this or glorify it, it just is what it is. Like, I've worked 7 days a week for the past year. And,
Yep.
and every time I'm saying yes to these things, right, to these training sessions on the weekends, I am saying no to something else. And oftentimes that's time with my wife and my kid.
Yes.
But we are in agreement, right? Like that this is what's best for our family currently right now. Okay. So
Yes.
that's
Yes.
the one side of thing, right? Like I have to be in agreement with that side because they have to know I'm doing this for the better of us, not just
Yep.
me. Okay. All right. That's number one. Number
Yes.
two, right? Like we agree, like obviously that you would not go see a dentist with wooden teeth, right?
Yes.
I do
Yes.
not think I am not, and I mean I know this is a hotly debated topic, but I am not somebody who thinks that trainers have to be show ready, bodybuilding show ready 12 months out of the year. But man, you got to practice what you preach to some degree. And
Yeah.
that does not mean like, hey, I lift really light weights and go on long walks. Man, you got to put some effort in the gym. Like I want to
Yeah.
know because when I'm like I demand a lot out of my clients and they demand a lot out of me. Like they
Yep.
demand me to coach them to a high degree. They want the gym to look a certain way, this and that. But when they're ready and I want them to put in effort, like it's go time. And I think that it's important that they see that I do that as well. Um, and, but yeah, man, like you cannot pour from an empty cup, right? Like,
Yeah.
and this job sometimes is pretty thankless. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? With
Yeah.
hard clients and in a job where you give so much of yourself, like don't forget about yourself in the process.
Yeah.
And that means carving out time. So because I work Saturdays, so I get up so I have 5:15 a.m. sessions Tuesday through Friday. Tuesday and Fridays are half days where I'm done by 1, and at that time, like I can do stuff around the house. I can have the afternoons with my son and my wife,
Yeah.
etc. And then obviously Saturday I'm in a half day, and then Sunday's only a couple of hours. But I still have those times on the weekends. But that Tuesday and Friday night, being off is I had to carve that out for my family.
Yeah.
And that has worked. That has served me for now, but it's not going to serve me forever because when Caleb starts in sports and I got to be a travel coach and I want to be present at these things
Yes.
because that's just the type of dad I want to be, then my schedule is going to change. So I
Yep.
have to be proactive now on, okay, if I want the flexibility and the time flexibility to be able to do this, like what does that mean for me scaling my business now so I can get there when I want to?
Yes.
Right. And what do
Yes.
those numbers look like? What do my employees look like? Do I have employees? Like, am I still renting space? Like, what does this look like? And if that's the vision, then let me work backwards.
Dude,
Um,
that's sorry. I was just going to say that is awesome. That's
yeah.
awesome. Having that long-term vision, that is the first point right there. Anyway, sorry, go ahead.
Right. So, and then like when you have that vision, like that will help you lead the decisions and the behaviors and the actions that requires,
Yep.
right? And like, I get it, man. Like having a kid up all night, like my son's currently going through like multiple ear infections and he's cutting his molars right now,
Mm,
and it is a rough time for
good
him during the
times.
night
Good
sometimes.
times. Yeah.
Um, but you know what I mean? So getting up at 5 or 4 o'clock in the morning, Tuesday through Friday, has become easier because like he's just been up at night. Do you know what I mean? So it
Yeah.
makes it that easier. But like sometimes, man, you just got to do what's required, like regardless of your feelings. And as like unempathetic as that sounds or insensitive as that sounds, like it just is what it is. Like you can
Yes.
always, there will always be an excuse on a reason, or there will always be a reason not to train hard. You
Yeah.
slept like crap, you know what I mean? Like X, Y, and Z, but like it's got to get done to some degree. And that doesn't mean like you can't back off on your training on days that's needed, but it takes what it takes, whether it's on the business side. Do you know what I mean? Like I'm sure
Yeah.
you had some pretty lofty RTS goals and you had the checklist that you just checked off for
Yeah.
2024 and 2025, right?
Yeah.
But that's what was required. There's probably a lot of late nights, probably, you know what I mean? Some
Yeah.
missed opportunities with your kids, but like that's just what it takes.
Yes.
And, you know, if that leads you to more freedom and, you know, then that's, you know, that's just what it is. And I think
Dude,
that I didn't mean to cut you off, but I think
no.
it's important as a coach, like defining what success means. Like when people say, "Oh, do you run a successful training business?" I don't know, man. Like, what's your definition of a success? Is my definition of success grossing 250K a year and not seeing my kids? Probably not. Or grossing half of that and being able to spend time at home and do all these things, right? I think you have
Yes.
to define what that looks like for your business and then go from there.
Dude, so many so many great points. And I'm so glad you like tripled down on that defining success because I don't
Right.
think enough people have done that and therefore they are lost and confused as to what success means to them, right?
Right.
Because you and I both know. I mean, we've been in the same room with people that literally they're on the road all the time. They're on all the best speaking tours. They're probably making great money, and they are miserable
Right.
outside of anything else outside of their confines of being on a stage or being on the road. They're miserable when they're at home. So I think that idea of defining success is huge. Something else that I wrote down, when we talk about balanced training, right? So let's say you want to build like the most physically robust human, right? They are going to
Right.
be mobile and strong and powerful and conditioned. Well, when you build that program, you don't balance the thing every cycle, right? Like
Yep.
you start with, hey, like let's focus on mobility. Now we're going to maintain your mobility and layer strength. Now we have those. Now, there's like layers and levels to it.
For
That's
sure.
literally what you described with your business, right? So for you to be able to be where you want to be when, what's your son's name?
Caleb.
Caleb. So when Caleb's older, you want to say, hey, look, I did all this work for the first 3 to 4 years being in this space. So now I can, hey, I'm going to work mornings so the afternoons when he gets off the bus, we can hang out. I can take him to soccer practice or baseball or basketball, whatever he plays. I mean, that's exactly what I did. Now, here's the thing. Again, outside looking in, other people would be like, well, you could have so many more clients. You could be making so much more money. I'm like, yeah, I
Right.
probably could. But I could also, like you alluded to, be that guy that doesn't know his kids. So
Right.
that's where it's like, hey, man, if you want to be dual income, no kid, make 7 figures, great. You can do that. Just to understand, like, our definitions of success are not one and the same. And that doesn't
Right.
make either one of us wrong.
Not at
It's just
all.
being comfortable with the decisions that you've made for yourself.
Right. And there's always a cost to doing business. Like there's
Yes.
literally always
Yes.
a cost. And if you are cool with that cost in the beginning and you're in agreement with your family, because I would hope that you would include them on that decision, then cool.
Yes.
Then do that. Right. But like
Yes.
just as you mentioned, right? Like there are times that I will give my wife a ton of credit, right? She does a lot for our son and probably most for our son because like I have to be here, right? Like
Yeah.
my wife is on an annual salary, right? So like when I lose a couple clients a month or something like that, right? It's not like she can go to her boss and be like, "Hey, can I have a 15% raise?" The boss would be like, "Kick rocks! Like, what are you doing?" So it's on me to be in the gym and you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
follow up on leads and make more connections and stuff like that. So because I do that, like I would say that her involvement at home is way up here and mine may be a little bit down. Do you know what I mean?
Yes.
But in different seasons of our life, maybe the dimmer switches are a little bit
Yes.
different. And that's the same thing with training, right? So say we're going to work on a little bit more hypertrophy. So the power stuff is down here and the hypertrophy is up here. And then in
Yes.
different phases of their training cycle, things change. But what's really funny that I just thought about, like, how much of your activities with Kate and Kendall have dictated how you train? Like, it's so
A
funny
ton.
how I train now. Like, it's such a
Yeah.
concurrent training model, and I run, I jump, I sprint,
Yeah.
I do all of these things, and I'm like, it's because I know I need to chase my son around and do all these
Yeah.
things, and I'm trying not to tear a hamstring
Yeah.
or tear my
Yeah.
Achilles doing it.
Yeah. Dude, okay. I don't know if I've ever shared this before, but like I had an awesome dad, right? He took me to everything. I mean, this guy worked full time at a university. My mom owned a horse farm, so shit was always breaking, dude. Like something's
Mm-hmm.
always broken or there's always work to do. But this guy would always throw the football, throw the baseball. The only thing was when it came to baseball, he's like, dude, I can only throw so many pitches, man. My shoulder, and I love baseball at the time. So,
Yeah,
this
yeah.
sucks, man. I wish he could throw more. So that was always one of my things in the back of my brain is like, hey, I want to be able to throw BP. And last year, Cade's baseball team, I don't know why, not one of these other dads would ever throw BP. So
Right.
I had a night where I legit probably threw 250 pitches. Now my shoulder felt like it was going to fall off the next day,
Right,
but I
right.
threw like damn near 250 pitches. So it's like, that's what you mean, right? It's like you're
Yep.
training for the season of life. You're not probably just banging out max effort clean and jerks and snatches anymore.
Right,
You probably
right.
do a little bit to fill in that power gap.
For sure.
But again, training where you're at, and for me, like it's being able to demo stuff in the gym,
Yep.
right? Because again, I got high level athletes, so
Yep.
I'm not going to jump like them, but I should be able to demo a box jump or a hip turn, and then
look
being able to
athletic
go out and do
doing
stuff
so.
with my kids. Yeah, not look like just a broken down former
Right.
power lifter. You know what I
Right,
mean?
right. And it's
So-
probably taken you a lot of years to unwind some of that
Oh, yeah.
powerlifting stiffness. You're probably
Oh,
still
yeah.
dealing with it.
I don't know if I'll ever fully get around it, but
Right.
yeah, it's like okay, the season of life has shifted, so that's where I'm going to put more time and energy.
Oh, for sure. And I mean, don't get me wrong, right? Like we all have that little bit of that ego itch, and I still like to bang some heavy weights here and there. But it's like I understand that I am very volume sensitive.
Yep.
So I could I'm really good at hitting heavy singles and doubles. But
Yep.
when we started getting into like, I don't know, man, like somewhere between 5s and 8s for
Yep.
like at a relatively like medium to like high intensity, I feel like dog shit and I can't recover from that. And I think that as you get older, like I've been training hard and long enough that I understand like what I can recover from and what I can't. So now
Yes.
I know that, like, obviously I work with a coach and I have for over a year now, but like it's nice to have somebody objectively look at my training and just follow a program. Like I write
Yes.
enough programs for other people that when I write for myself, I usually get hurt. I usually give myself too much volume. Something happens. So it's nice to kind of just follow the recipe and do my thing.
Yeah. One of the things that I found, I talked about it in maybe it was the Fit Over 40 podcast. I don't know. I create so much content anymore, I forget. But this idea or this concept of touching intensity, right? And I'm sure Dan John talked about this, but like when you're younger, right, you can go in, you can max out, you can squat every day, you can do all these things.
Right.
But I think as you get older, it's more about touching that intensity every now and then. It's like just temperature check, right? Do I still have it when I need it, right? Versus feeling the need to go out and display it every time you're in the gym. And so that's even something I've carried over with my athletes, right? Most of them have the force production. They've got the bounce. They've got all those things.
Right.
It's just like, hey, in the off season, let's get you feeling good. Let's get you back to where you can be on the court or on the pitch every day, pain-free. And let's just touch a little bit of intensity so that we know it's there if you need it.
Right. Like, let's touch it a little bit, but it's not going to matter so much in Indiana as it's going to matter in the national stage of the national televised game. Right? Like nobody cares if I'm front squatting 405 in the middle of Hartford on a random Tuesday morning.
Right.
Great freaking job, bro. Like nobody cares. So, and I notice it a lot, like personally, like in my sprinting. Like I cannot, when I touch max velocity on the track in my spikes, because on the true form here, it feels different and it's just not the same.
Sure.
The impact through my foot and lower leg and my Achilles and stuff like that is not the same on a true form in running shoes as it is on track and my spikes. But like during the summer months when I'm out there and I touch, like above 90% max velocity, like I am only touching it like for 1 or 2 reps, maybe. And it's a
Yeah.
build up to that, and then that's it. Because
Mm.
I literally can't recover from that. And I
Yeah.
remember when I was in my early 20s or mid 20s, and and I'm running hard hundreds, 150s, 200s, and recovering well, like that was a different time. It's not what
Yeah.
this is now.
It's so interesting because I wrote this program for dudes maybe more my age than yours, but it's this everyday athlete program, right? And so
Yep.
I for people that are like trying to get back and do some box jumps, do a little bit of sprint work, and I think when I wrote it, there's a sense of, man, this is really low volume. If you're only doing like 4 5s or like 2 10s, you also have to realize if you haven't done that stuff in forever,
Bro.
like sprint work will beat you up. And so you have to really manage that volume and that intensity and be smart about it.
Right. And it's like if you haven't done anything athletic, like 2 sets of 5 box jumps or some like medium or very low level pogos is enough, like in the
Yeah.
beginning. Like
Yeah.
and I attribute these like very low level plyos that I got from Kyle Dobbs years ago, like just micro dosing them on a daily basis has really kept my foot, ankle, and Achilles like relatively healthy. And I have some flare ups here and there, but like they have done wonders. And I think the was it Corey Schlesinger who first brought up microdosing
I
on your
mean,
podcast?
yes, he talked about it in the in season context. I know
Yeah.
Derek Hansen also talked about it in the
Yep.
sprint context.
Yep, exactly. And I think that like finding ways to do that, and for adults, right? Adults who want to be athletic, like how do we microdose some of this power into your program and not have it be too fatiguing that you can
Yes.
recover from it? And like this, when an adult does something athletic and it looks athletic, they feel like their face is like brings them back to their childhood, right? It's
Yes.
like
Yes.
and so I think there's a lot of good psychological benefit to that. It's just figuring out like when to implement it, the right time to implement it, and I think a lot of that comes down to knowing who you work with and having a rapport with them,
Yes.
right? Like knowing on the
Yes.
days that okay, everything looks good. Like I obviously don't have VBT at the gym, so I'm like, all right, how does this rep speed look? Like, all right, like how does everything feel today? Let's do a couple, small, medium jumps and see how this feels, and then we can let the reins go a little bit. Or
Yep.
if they feel like trash, then maybe we back off that day.
Yeah. No, I love it, man. Well, Steve, dude, this was awesome.
Yeah,
Exactly what I was hoping for. Fantastic show, and I think people are going to take a ton away from it. Where can my listeners find out more about you and the great work that you're doing?
yeah. So the best place to do is on Instagram or Facebook. It's the on Instagram, it's the Strength Spot WH, and on Facebook, it's the Strength Spot. And yeah, that's it. And then my email, if anybody had any questions or reach out, yeah, we can connect that way.
I love it. Well, Steve, again, man, thank you so much for coming on, brother. I really appreciate it.
All right, thanks, Mike. This was great.